Granblue Fantasy Relink has been in development process since 2016, and finally, after 8 long years, the game will see the light of day on February 1st this year. Many have anticipated this game since it was announced, including myself of course, and recently, Cygames provided a demo on PlayStation consoles which covers the majority of what Granblue Fantasy Relink can offer to the table. I am the Samurai, and I will be going over the game's mechanics and general gameplay, and I will also sharing my impressions on it so you can decide whether this game is for you or not, or come to a conclusion if the long wait was worth it. Together, let's find out as we deep dive into the world of Granblue Fantasy Relink. We are going to dive straight to core gameplay, skipping the story and setting for now. There were no specific details about the story that were shown in the latest demo so far. However, I can say that it is expected that the game will follow a typical JRPG storyline, where the main characters will be involved in an ever-growing conflict or an endeavor, and soon will find yourself saving the world. In the demo, players will be given the chance to pick between 3 modes. The first mode is all about mechanics of the game, or a tutorial perhaps, and this is an avenue for you to learn the basics of combat. The second is the story mode, where the game will show you how the story progresses, how fights are being incorporated into it, and overall how a main quest progresses. Main quests are objective based, and it is almost impossible to be lost here since players will be given a clear and simple objectives to complete to progress in the main scenario. These objectives are common tasks like saving people from being captive, saving them from danger, or even defeating a main boss in the area. You know the drill. Things are relatively straightforward, and I have a strong feeling that it will stay the same during the entirety of the game, so expect a straightforward experience like any JRPG formula that we have seen in the past. The third mode, which is the side quest mode, lets players experience how side quest works and how multiplayer is being played, since you can play with 3 other players online when completing a quest, which I will dive into later on. On the other hand, the focal point of Granblue Fantasy Relink is its overall gameplay, and definitely one of its greatest strengths that I want to focus on, and without a doubt the big chunk and meat of the game. As an action role-playing enthusiast, its combat draws my attention more than anything else, and I will wholeheartedly say that they did exceptionally well in all aspects. You can see the sheer efforts and passion that the developers put into this, and fellow JRPG fans will surely feast on it. Each battle was exciting and thrilling, and the overall combat were a combination of all staple formulas that we have already seen in the past. There were no mind-blowing breakthroughs here or anything like that, but Cygames capitalized on the basics and did everything extremely well. Exploration can easily turn into combat thanks to its seamless transitions with no loading times. Diving into the nitty-gritty here, and starting with the normal attacks, which feedback satisfying hits paired with visually pleasing and unique animations for both normal attacks and skills. Each character in the game will have their own set of unique skills. No copy-paste skills or whatever in here, at least from what I've seen in the demo, but instead I was given with well-designed animations and executions, and right here, my lords and ladies, is what you call passion, and it is a huge plus. I find myself drooling over these animations most of the time, especially when it is time for me to use my Skybound arts. These are specialized and favorably well-designed attacks that heighten the battle in most cases, which later turns into a chain burst reaction to top it all off. Executing these eye-whopping combos usually stops me from breathing for a while, and I can't help but to be satisfied and filled with excitement. Since this is an action role-playing game, I tend to be picky about how the controls will respond to me. Respectively, 90% of the controls were responsive, and real-time movesets were satisfying to execute without some sort of delay or clunkiness. One thing that distracts me though is how jumping works, which I find unresponsive at times. It feels slow and clunky at times, and jumping while doing aerial combos distracts me in most cases. This is an ARPG after all, so I kinda expected that going into mid-air should be smooth, so I hope this can be adjusted soon. Just like in any ARPG, the first couple of battles may be overwhelming due to a lot of happening in the background. But after a series of fights, the user will get a hang of it, and it will be more organized and adapt in the long run. Now, when it comes to enemy attacks, these are well telegraphed so the players can react to it, even if we are just talking about regular enemies. But in bosses, this is where the real fun starts. Boss fights, especially the main or bigger ones, will be the height of experience in Granblue Fantasy Relink. As expected, bosses pose a fair challenge, even the first bosses in the game. Each boss is unique in terms of attack animations, ability weaknesses, and more. I can confidently tell it will get better and better as we fight at the endgame bosses and optional bosses. On the other hand, players can just mindlessly hack their way and guns blazing in these bosses, especially when we are talking about endgame bosses. Bosses in this game will have special mechanics that players will need to learn or figure out in able to dodge heavy hitting attacks or projectiles. These special attacks are paired with visual AoE cues so the players will know what area to avoid or where is the safe spot most of the time. Of course, the ones shown in the demo are just basic ones, and definitely there will be a lot of engaging and exciting mechanics to learn in the latter part of the game, and this awfully sounds familiar. Overall combat, and especially endgame boss fights, will have a lot of mechanics reminiscent of Final Fantasy XIV, especially when talking about mechanics. I was a Savage Raider in FF14 in the past, so it is kinda hard to not to compare the two at times, especially after seeing how the boss's mechanics were laid out in the trailer. The hardest fights in the game will require proper team composition, who is going to be the healer, support, and DPS, and all that fun stuff. As I mentioned, players will be forced to figure out and learn challenging mechanics in these fights, and I am here for it. I don't think it will be as hard as Savage Tiers in Final Fantasy XIV, but perhaps this game's endgame content or fights are safe to compare to the normal raid tiers or regular raid bosses in FF14. If you don't agree with me on this one or it being compared to FF14, the next thing that I can remember is Dragalia Lost, a mobile game that is an ARPG as well. And I can't help but remember that game when I finally got my hands on Granblue Fantasy Relink. At least for me, it is Dragalia Lost with FF14 mechanics and at least a little bit of Monster Hunter mechanics combined with the visuals of Tales of Arise. Now when it comes to side quests, let's go back to this, and this is pretty important since online multiplayer will play a big role in the game's replayability. When doing online co-op, you will be thrown into a hub where there's a quest counter, blacksmith for weapon upgrades, or even item shops. This is awfully familiar with how gathering hubs work in the Monster Hunter series. In the hub, participants can change their characters and their character loadouts, even upgrade weapons and buy items. The host will decide what quest they will take on and embark on a journey. Side quests work straightforwardly. It's either your party will beat a horde of enemies or kill a giant boss. Upon completing a quest, players will be rewarded with materials to progress their character pieces of equipment. Speaking of equipment and character progression, character customization in this game will be massive. Not only players can customize their skill loadout in combat, but players will also have the freedom to level up their character, change their weapons into stronger ones, and equip sigils. These are accessories that provide additional traits that further boost the character's stats or provide passive abilities. At this early, you can definitely see that replayability and content are going to be massive in this game, which I will get into a minute. Moving on to audio and visuals, judging from the gameplay that I have shown you, it is quite impossible for us to not see the level of effort and passion that was put into the visual aesthetics of this game. Although we are not going to play in an open world, the visual fidelity of a specific instance is just an eye-whopping. Aside from its exceptional gameplay, the visual fidelity of Granblue Fantasy Relink is excellent in all possible ways. From character illustrations, clean UI, level design, and skill animations to character models. Audio design wise, it is one of the key aspects of the game's overall presentation. Combat sound effects in general made the whole combat reach another level. Explosions, attack hits, and even footsteps were intricately made and pleasing to the ear. The Ian voice, on the other hand, is a bit lacking in my opinion, which I find a little disappointing since I tend to switch to English voiceovers recently, even to JRPGs. Whether you are in English or Japanese voiceover, combat dialogue provides an immersive sense that makes me feel that I am fighting in a unified group, especially when under tight situations. The only big downside that I can think of as of now is about the game's performance in which console players will be involved. As for the demo, the game has two modes. The first is performance mode, which is locked behind 1080p resolution to have 60 FPS, while quality mode allowed me to play in 4K but suffer 30 FPS. 1080p doesn't look too good even on a 1080p monitor, and this is the main reason why I will play it on PC. The PS5 console can do a lot better here, especially since other games can access 2K resolution with 120 FPS. Let's talk about replayability and its pricing. By just showing the character customization and character progression, it is without a doubt that good replayability value will be no question in this game. With 17 confirmed characters to play with in the main game, experimenting with different setups or playing with different characters or builds will obviously net more replayability. According to the developers, the main storyline will last up to 20 hours, but endgame content, meaning finishing all of the side quests, can easily net over 100 hours of gameplay. Especially when playing with friends or in multiplayer, you can get more hours and can double that amount. Priced at $59.99 USD, there is a high chance that the level of content and production will justify its price. I will still be on the lookout for the actual release and update the actual review with my final recommendation. Granblue Fantasy Relink just blew me away in all aspects. If you are a fan of the series or you just love Japanese role-playing games in general, I highly suggest giving this game a chance, especially if you are going to play with friends. Granblue Fantasy fans, on the other hand, will celebrate this title. With Granblue Fantasy Relink's top-notch visuals, combat design, JRPG antics, and rich replayability, it is shaping to be one of the best JRPGs in 2024, and I cannot wait for the actual release. I hope this video helped you decide if you are going to play this game, especially if you are still on the fence. Subscribe to the channel if you want more of these, and liking the video surely helps me a lot. You can watch the full demo walkthrough here if you want more of it, and I will see you on the next one.